Okay, Mike, you around?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Let me,
Did you follow all that stuff we just went through?
I took 3 pages of notes, so
Okay. Okay, good.
we'd like to get copies of the, what he posted, if you all don't mind sending Warden Smith and the Ferguson group, a package of those pictures and graphs that he used. That would be most helpful,
Okay.
especially as we're
Yeah,
getting ready to go to Washington.
yeah,
Yeah.
we'll be posting all those online, Mike, so definitely. And just to want to acknowledge we're at 10:15. I
Right.
think we can run you to 11 for your full 45 minutes. We can catch up over the break. So just want to,
Okay.
okay.
All right. With that, you ready for us to go?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you all for this opportunity to join you again on the retreat. We've enjoyed doing that over the years. And also, thank you for inviting us to that presentation we just saw. We had all of our team watching and listening, and it was most helpful. Joining us today, as you can see in the presence of your room, is Marley Peterson from our law firm. And we also have by video Earl Stockdale, who was former chief counsel to the Corps of Engineers and is a consultant with the Ferguson Group, Brad Schwittenberg, who was a senior advisor to the Corps of Engineers and worked with them also and is now a consultant with the Ferguson Group. And we are also, of course, pleased to have Roger Gwynn, CEO of the Ferguson Group, and Ann Durand, who many of you know, who's a senior analyst for the Ferguson Group. So we've got our entire team here from Warden Smith and the Ferguson Group as we work together with you. We've jumped on several manners, as many of you know, from the very beginning of January this year, and especially enjoyed working on and then meeting with by mid-January with the mayor and the village manager and assistant manager regarding long range planning, some of the items that the mayor had proposed and that we discussed and we analyzed before we even met with the mayor and then talked with him about those items, as well as items that we need to focus on right away. Now that finally Congress has a budget and finally we have started the new fiscal year after the State of the Union address last week by the president, the real budget work now begins because the White House sends its budget to Capitol Hill, and of course Congress starts adjusting and deciding what it wants to do because Congress ultimately will have the final say in terms of what budget is passed. As many of you may recall, but just a reminder, the federal fiscal year is separate from the state year. So the federal fiscal year starts on October 1st, which means FY 2027 begins then. So the discussions that are going on now and going into full force as we go into March and April, these 2 months will be especially critical for talking about FY 2027 appropriations. We're looking forward to having you send a delegation up to Washington as you've done the past several years, and we've enjoyed working with you. Please remember that you'll be traveling probably, most of you, on the Sunday, March 22nd. And then we have meetings scheduled for Capitol Hill and in Washington on Monday, the 23rd, Tuesday, the 24th of March, which is now this month. So time is approaching quickly. Chris, if you would please remember, Chris McCall, to send to both Warden Smith and the Ferguson Group the names, email addresses, and cell phone numbers, which we will keep confidential, but we need to have those as well, as you all know, in case meetings get changed at the last moment or in case we're searching for someone who may have gone down the hall and we want to make sure we've got our whole group together. And other reasons we would like to have, and for security as well, the names, the email addresses, and the cell phone numbers for those who will be coming on behalf of Bald Head Island to Washington. So if you can get those to us, that would be most helpful as we finalize our plans. We are excited. A lot of the offices will not confirm times of day until 2 or 3 weeks before the actual meetings, sometimes 4 weeks. So we're within that window and should soon be able to confirm those meetings. But Ann Durand of the Ferguson Group is working on finalization of the times of day that those meetings will occur. And obviously, we'll provide those to you as soon as we have those confirmed. In the meantime, we're working on the items that will be discussed. And I know you'll be having a village council meeting tomorrow afternoon. And as Chris and I have discussed, rather than trying to present you a report that could virtually change overnight tonight or by tomorrow or in the next 2 or 3 days with the Capitol Hill offices, we're happy to join you and give you the report live today in the presentations that you'll hear. So this will be our presentation to you for the month of March, because that's what we're about now in terms of where we are currently and where we plan to be by the end of the month after our meetings on Capitol Hill. So presenting today, first we'll have Ann Durand, and she'll be going through some of the technical policy issues that we are preparing for the package and getting ready to discuss as she finalizes the appointments on Capitol Hill. I had called all the offices back in January to alert them to our dates, and she's fine-tuning it, as we said, on the actual meeting times. Earl Stockdale will follow her with regard to discussion of feasibility study and other beach issues. And then Brad Schwittenberg will follow up with the concerns about some of the technical and policy sides of this discussion that we may have to deal with the Corps of Engineers. And so with that, and in light of the time, I'm going to go right ahead, Mr. Mayor, with your permission, and we'll proceed with our team doing some of the more detailed presentations. So Ann Durand, if you would please start us off.
Good morning, everybody. Who has the, I guess, the permission for the slides, or do
I can give you permission if you'd like.
or you can click through yourself, but I'm happy to click if you would like.
Let's see.
While we get that set up, we've kind of designed, I know we're limited on time and want to have everybody have the ability to ask questions about each topic. So we're going to I'm going to run through the federal update first. And then Brad and Earl are going to discuss some of the other issues. And then we've left a lot of time at the end to discuss each issue and have questions. Let's see, let me share my screen. So, looking back at the first year of this new administration, the executive orders at the first half of last year that were coming through by the dozen, it seemed every hour, were really what drove the policy direction of the administration and what we were going to see happen throughout the year. The focus has been a lot of reduction of the red tape and streamlining processes and permitting within government agencies. There were a lot of layoffs from DOGE at the beginning across the federal government, which has complicated some services, notably FEMA would be one that we've seen an impact of over the last year, and response recovery. Another was a pretty much complete stoppage of any offshore wind projects. When I reviewed last year's presentation to the village, we talked about offshore winds, but it's really completely stopped right now through executive orders and Department of Interior directives. And that has remained the same throughout the whole year. If we look ahead to this year, year two, the State of the Union just last week was really what we see the plan for the year to be, and there really isn't going to be any changes. was not any firm policy priorities or goals so much stated. So we operate that it will be the same this year as it was last year, even with the external factors of midterms coming up and polling on policies, different uh, international conflicts. But it seems the administration is going to direct the same policy goals throughout this year. Uh, there's the energy dominance policy and right now the administration has really opened up drilling and domestic oil production. May a return to coal as an energy priority, and then most recently, solar has been a friendly energy area with the administration. All of that to say, very friendly or very focused on energy dominance for everything but wind, offshore wind. They're very hostile to any offshore wind projects. Um, the focus is going to be a lot on affordability issues and cost of living. We've seen some legislation on housing, healthcare, tax cut ideas. How effective and how far some of these get remains to be seen, but that will be affordability will be a word, and cost of living will be something the administration focuses a lot of. Midterm elections loom over everything this year. Even though that is occurring in Congress, the administration, everybody is just really focused on the midterms. And in addition to that, now, since this weekend, global conflicts like Iran also is going to be a dominating factor and issue we see that affects some of our policy and legislative issues we work on. For Congress, last year was the first year of the 119th Congress. So this year is the second and final year of that congressional term that was dominated by, in the first bit, the passage of the full year CR, and that was the full year CR for 25 that didn't include any earmarks. So that was notable for that reason. Much of the legislative focus was for HR 1, which was the big, beautiful bill, which created the tax cuts, and that was really almost 100% of Congress's focus until they completed that in July. Passage of the budget and bills for FY26. We saw the largest or the longest shutdown in September or in October and November last year, which really put a halt on a lot of things as we navigated that shutdown last year. They did in February sign all of the budget bills with the exception of the Department of Homeland Security. And that is still shut down right now. There's not been a whole lot of headway on an agreement to reopen the Department of Homeland Security. And that, of course, that affects FEMA, and FEMA disaster response right now. There's been a lot of committee hearings and consideration on bills for housing, FEMA reform, and permitting reform. I would expect to see some of those hearings continue this year. And what comes out of those and what actually happens legislatively remains to be seen. This year, midterms. What is happening right now is the Congress is working on FY27 appropriations, and that's really been quite the flurry of fast information and very quick deadlines coming up, which shows us that they're very focused on getting this completed very fast, because obviously the deadline is September 30th for the budget, and right after that is midterms. So I think the focus here is really getting a budget passed and getting it done, and focusing on midterms and not having a shutdown through the elections in November. Um, the other priorities are going to be the National Defense Authorization Act in December. The FEMA Act of 2025 is one that we are watching and will want to ourselves be a part of. The committees have really telegraphed this is going to be a very important and priority piece of legislation, which will probably pick up after these appropriation deadlines right now that are happening through end of March. But this will come back into focus. They've really stressed a commitment for it to be bipartisan and that they also are very interested in stakeholder comment and feedback for Bald Head Island being in the location it is, and as often as FEMA comes up, is going to be somebody that they're really going to want to hear from and weigh in on the legislation and text for this bill. So that will be something we will be continue to watch and continue to look to give feedback on. The National Flood Insurance Act reauthorization. This is probably just going to get punted and extended with no reauthorization, but just keep doing what they've been doing. The surface transportation reauthorization is going to be a very big deal. That happens every 5 years, and that is this year. So that is going to take up a lot of space in Congress. And then WRDA this year, as well as the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is going to be important because the subsidies for that ends in September. They've already extended this for quite a while, and I think they're wanting to focus on actually concluding that issue. For your priorities, now we're going to go into this section, and Brad can lead off here.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So first of all, just to be clear, based on the last discussion we had for the last hour, an excellent discussion on the coastal engineering issues and challenges and sand options. The Corps, as you all know, I'm just going to reinforce it, I guess, does not have a federal shore protection project with Bald Head Island. What you are is you're the beneficiaries of the Wilmington Harbor O&M dredging project. And so a lot of good discussion about that. And just to differentiate between the two, a federal shore protection project is when the Corps gets authorized into law, either a beach nourishment project or maybe a beach nourishment project with some other structures in place to help retain the sand. So we don't have that. And so as we talked about last year, and again this time, the study will look at the possibility of doing a 50-year project with you all. The study will cost roughly, I'm just going to do some highlights, roughly $3 million total, of which you would be responsible for $1.5 million. That $1.5 million can be cash or it can be work in kind. That is work that you've done that's applicable to the study or work that you'll do through your consultants or other means that are applicable to the study. So let's see. We have a study authorization, which means we have written into law or otherwise available authority for us to do the study. And so the next step would be to get the funding to start the study. And you know, with the 3 years and $3 million total, of which $1.5 million is federal, they don't typically split it up as 500,000, 500,000, 500,000 in 3 sequential years. They usually give you something less than that for the first year to sign agreements. agree with the Corps and scope of work, et cetera. And in a federal study, you are a 50% partner. Your needs, your desires, your concerns, your guidance is a critical part of the study. So, although the Corps has certain procedures it needs to do, such as determining the different plans and what are the benefit to cost ratios for the plans, your input, you're walking side by side with the Corps. It's not the Corps does something and punts it over to you and says yes or no. You're there all along the way. Next slide. So last year we were seeking a new start earmark or ad, if you will, Representative Rouser, and we ran into some headwind from the actual Wilmington district. The top civilian at Wilmington has retired. There's new leadership in place, and we have talked with them, and they are amenable to doing the study with us and amenable to expressing capability to support us. And I will say last year was a weird year because it was the first year of the Trump administration. There, as has been mentioned, there were a lot of folks that took the early retirement from all across the federal government. And so, the different regional offices and district offices in the Corps were kind of stepping back and trying to figure out, did they have enough people to do all the work? And we're in a much better place this year. Like I said, new leadership, they've expressed a positivity, including the commander. So I think we're in a good place to once again ask Mr. Rouser for a New Start congressional ad. And as we have the meetings in DC, those discussions will occur, and we'll let you all know how that goes. Now, the study looks at all viable. Now, one of the questions that was asked during the last great discussion was, what happens if we can't get frying pan shoal? And the answer is that this study, or any other study you would do on your own, will reevaluate any other options. I know that there's been a lot of work done on other options, but it will reevaluate, are there any other options out there besides besides frying pan shoal, such as, nearshore sand or other sand options, maybe different dredging areas within the Wilmington Harbor Channel that haven't been dredged or haven't been dredged to full depth that are close by. You all mentioned you all mentioned the possibility of getting some sand from Caswell Beach when it's their turn, so that they're not, I'm going to put in quotes, overnourished, and that the right amount of sand gets to both islands, including Bald Head. And that is something that can be discussed in the study further, and how that works in conjunction with the Wilmington Harbor O&M project. So look at all viable alternatives, screen alternatives based upon some basic criteria. And people mentioned that hard structures in North Carolina are difficult to get permitted or frowned upon. And that is true. And that'll be some of the early discussions we'll have when the alternatives are screened, along with potential benefits and costs. Is the alternative too big, too costly? Are the benefits too low for a particular alternative, et cetera? And then they'll get a final array of alternatives, which will be fully developed with benefits and costs, with environmental work, engineering work, et cetera. And that will lead to a tentative plan for selection. Okay. The Corps ultimately looks at, do the benefits exceed the cost? And if the benefits exceed the cost, then it can move forward with a recommendation for authorization and ultimately construction. I'm just going to be honest, beach nourishment projects have different administrations that view them more favorably than others. And sometimes you can get your project authorized and you have to wait a while for the construction funding. last decade or so, the construction funding for most of these new projects have come when a hurricane supplemental comes through, and a lot of the beach nourishment projects that are authorized are picked up then. Now, if we're fortunate enough to have a robust benefit to cost ratio above 2.0, then it makes us much more competitive for budgeting in a normal year. And then lastly, half our benefits can come from, well, half our benefits can come from recreational benefits, but in addition, the remaining benefits, or all the other benefits we count, are from prevention of damages due to storms. Next. All right. I've kind of covered all this. But basically, this is just more detail on the different types of surveys and stuff. So in addition to what the Chris Creed and his team would do, they would do a very detailed environmental thing, a very detailed environmental analysis, and making sure that they're complying with all the federal laws. And the other benefit to having the Corps do the study is that they are on parity with the federal resource agencies and certainly with the state resource agencies. Whereas when you're trying to get something like this permitted on your own, don't want to be non-diplomatic, but you're not on parity, I will say, with the state and federal resource agencies in the sense that, they have their regulatory responsibilities and you're a local community. So it doesn't mean that the Army Corps gets to strong arm or bully the other federal resource agencies, but they're supposed to be one team and they're supposed to professionally come to a resolution of concerns and disagreements as part of the federal family, whereas you don't have that level of parity on your own. So it's just sort of the facts on the ground. So that's a benefit. And I also want to say that, in the terrible situation that the study goes through a couple of years and we just can't find a plan with a benefit cost ratio greater than 1, all of the analysis is turned over to you. All of the coordination that's been done with the federal and state resource agencies and all the environmental stuff that has been done can all be turned over to you. So there's not a big risk on going through the study because the information, the coordination, and all the work is still turned over to you and usable for you. Okay, next. Okay, now that concludes my part. I just want to entertain some questions before Earl gets into the additional work agreement.
Yeah, Brad, a quick one. When you're talking about the Corps of Engineers study, I'm constantly looking back at time frame. And when we're looking at our application for frying pan shows and how the Corps might be supportive because they'd be on parity with the other federal agencies. But if the Corps study is something that doesn't get completed for X number of years, the issue happens in 3 years and Corps isn't done for 5, 6 years. Can you address that a little bit?
So I think what you're talking about is the timing of the frying pan shoals permitting and
Versus the schedule of the Corps of Engineer feasibility study.
so the best case scenario is the frying pan shoal permitting gets resolved and the we call it, what do we call it? We call it a one-time, at least that's the initial thought, right?
Right.
A one-time nourishment using frying pan shoals is permitted and even constructed. That's the best case scenario for the study because it shows proof of concept, and the study would then focus on subsequent uses of the frying pan shoal based upon all that successful work. If the frying pan shoal permitting drags on and becomes integral to the study process, the two efforts would work in parallel and would complement each other. And certainly when the study is, neither the study nor the permitting would we would communicate fully to make sure there were no, miscommunications or conflicts between the two efforts. Good question. Thank you. Any other questions?
Not a question, just a point for Slaughter and Jesse, newer council members on board with this. We did include in this current fiscal year budget $200,000 on the initial cost share of the feasibility study, but I think as Brad indicated, the local core district indicated they could not handle the additional workload. At least that's what they told Congressman Rouser's office at the time. So those monies will likely go unspent. And if we continue to want to pursue this, we would just reappropriate in the upcoming budget.
Yeah, I want to say something very candidly. The ability to get one of these studies into the appropriations bill is pretty hard, and we do have a much better chance than many with Representative Rouser being so well placed. And as Chris mentioned, the headwind we ran into last time when Representative Rouser was ready to go with an earmark was that the core district said that they couldn't do it that year. But like I said, we became very concerned and we doubled down. We met with the commander and the top civilian leadership in the district and got assurances that they would be receptive to an earmark request this time. So if you all continue to decide that this is something you want to pursue, I think we go for it this time again because we're in a good position with Representative Rouser. And it's not a guarantee that he'll get the earmark through, but he has a much better chance than many, most members of Congress in the House. Over.
Yes, and let me say I would agree with Brad on that. And I had not heard what you just said a moment ago, Chris, that about the concern about whether or not Rouser would approve that this time around. We know what we ran into last year, but we have felt more positively about what the Corps has been telling us. So we're going to have to clear that up. If the Corps is in a position to go forward on this, we certainly want to make that clear to Rouser's office because the $250,000, I'm thrilled that you all have included that in your budget. So hold on to it a little bit longer until we at least get to Washington and have this discussion face to face.
Yes,
Mike,
and
just to be clear, Mike, just to be clear, that I was referencing that was what happened last year, not what I've recently been told. So
okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
yes,
thanks.
and it was a little bit of a surprise last year with what the Corps told us on that, or told Rouser's office, because they were completely ready to submit this, but they can only do what the Corps tells them. The work we've really done with Brad and Earl and the district this past year has really gone a long way in working with that and fixing that. And Rouser's office is aware of this, and we've kept them apprised and have that noted for if we submit this again this year. They will submit it again, and the Corps this time should be in a better position to agree to it and express capability.
Yep. So we're more optimistic this time around. Of course, we can't guarantee, but certainly we feel like we're on a much better track this time with the Corps and what that will mean with the potential approval by Rouser's office to go forward.
Yes. All right. Earl, are you ready?
Sure. As Brad just explained, the TFG Ward Smith team is looking at the recently provided authorization for the feasibility study as being the most effective tool to identify a comprehensive long-term solution to the challenge of stabilizing Bald Head Island's beaches. That authority modifies the existing authorized project in North Carolina to provide for a study that looks at hurricane and storm reduction measures, but also additional measures to stabilize beaches. So as Brad said, it's a good, flexible authority, and we want to take advantage of it. In the meantime, or in the interim, the TFG Ward Smith team stands ready to support the village's efforts to address its most immediate beach erosion needs by working with the Corps and taking advantage of opportunities to piggyback on the Corps' maintenance activities associated with Wilmington Harbor to utilize sand that is dredged from the harbor and to direct its placement on and at locations on Bald Head Island's beaches where it's needed most. Our most recent discussions with the Corps have focused on pursuing a possible partnership arrangement with the Corps under the terms of an additional work agreement where a portion of the sand that is being dredged from Wilmington Harbor would be placed at a different location than it would be ordinarily placed under the sand management plan. So the purpose of the additional work agreement really is to capitalize on an opportunity to partner with the Corps for sand placement under existing law. In concept, this agreement would provide for, and this is the previous slide, would provide for placement of 300,000 to 500,000 cubic yards of sand dredged from the harbor in accordance with the sand management plan on the east end of South Beach in 2027 to address erosion that's occurring at that location. The agreement would rely on a non-federal contribution of funds from the island to cover incremental costs of sand placement at a location other than the federal standard site. And that's really the least cost environmentally and engineeringly acceptable site, which is the west end of South Beach. Funds must be expended under this agreement with federal appropriations and must be provided voluntarily. In other words, there's no expectation of either repayment or credit on the village's part from the Corps. So some key takeaways from the discussions we've had with the Corps previously. The Corps has done this before, and in fact, the village has partnered with the Corps before to have additional sand placed on its beaches. Our discussions with the Corps have confirmed that there is existing environmental analysis already in place to allow sand to be placed at the east end of South Beach, should that continue to be thought advisable from the village's standpoint. I want to emphasize that under this agreement, we talked about, and I just mentioned, the village's responsibility to cover costs over and above the costs of the federal standard site. Those incremental sites or incremental costs would not include mobilization and demobilization expenses. Typically, they include the cost of moving sand and piping it to the different location. Terms of where we stand on this, this is still an active matter under consideration by you. The Corps has told us in our discussions with them that it would take about 6 months to finalize this additional work agreement. And the first step in moving toward finalizing that agreement would be for the island to send a letter to the Corps expressing its interest in pursuing a partnership arrangement with the Corps and in finalizing this agreement. And that is the extent of my comments on this agreement. Please feel free to ask additional questions or any questions that you may have.
Yeah, Earl, I have one. So in terms of going forward, there's no obligation for additional work. We can have this agreement in place without any obligation for actual work. Is that correct?
You would put this agreement in place to have a capability to have the work accomplished. But, you know, the actual agreement to pay would occur in connection with the Corps' actual contracting for the work.
Okay, so let me ask if I just heard what I wanted to hear. So what I'm asking is, can we have an agreement with the Corps, the additional work agreement, and it's a standing agreement that when we're ready, or if we're ever going to want additional work, that's when we tap into this agreement. But in the meantime, all it is an agreement, period. With no commitment on the village's side to actually do a project. It's not related to a project, it's related to a relationship.
Well, I guess there are a couple questions rolled into that statement. You can have an agreement in place that would, and an understanding with the Corps that would provide for, you know, multiple year undertakings. That is conceptually and academically possible. Typically, the Corps does not do that. They enter into these agreements on a one-time per occasion basis. But again, what I was driving at here and what I want to emphasize is that there is a lead up to the agreement, and the lead up to the agreement starts with the transmittal of a letter to the Corps saying you want to look at the possibility of consummating this agreement. When you send that letter to the Corps, there is no obligation on the part of the village to actually, at the end of the day, enter into that agreement. And so what would happen is after the letter is sent, you would work with the Corps to understand what the costs of the agreement would be to you, when the work would occur, and when your obligations to pay would arise. Assuming all of that information is acceptable to you, meaning you conclude it's in your interest to have the work done, that it's affordable, and it actually, you know, fulfills the need that you have. At that point, you would sign the agreement with the Corps. The Corps' contractual relationships with the dredging company would take this all into account And at that point, you would be bound to pay.
So Peter, what I heard is the answer is no. You can't just have one that's a blanket agreement ready to go. And
Right.
what we would do is when you start this, it starts the clock ticking. So you have to do it for instance. That's the summary of what he just said.
And
Right.
it's related to specific work as opposed to just a general agreement that
Right.
we're going to pull out of the file whenever we need it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so as we talked, for 2027, if we feel that there's a need for additional work to place sand at the east end of South Beach because there's erosion, that we would enter into the agreement that would include us, our engineers working with the Corps engineers for the fill template to determine how much sand's going to be placed down there. And then based on the bidding of those construction documents, that's when we would find out what the actuarial cost is to the village for that additional work.
Okay, great.
And at that point, we could decide whether to move forward or not.
But that's
Because the letter start the process of all that
Right.
investigation. And then once we have the cost, we'd say, no, we can't do that. Or, yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, that would be the question, Earl, after we go through that exercise, and as I think we've discussed, we still could not obligate ourselves if based on the cost that it's just too much, we can't afford it. I mean, is that correct?
Yes, the whole point of sending the letter to the Corps and working with the Corps in the interim is to develop information which would allow the village to determine whether it actually wants to go forward with the work that it presently was considering.
Okay, great. Thanks, Earl.
But there would obviously be a cost of even doing the research to figure out what we want to have done and what the template would be. I mean, we'd have to pay for all that just to be able to say, yeah, okay, we want to do it, right? I mean, we're not.
Yeah, I think those are minimal costs that
Okay.
just our engineers' time.
Right.
But the other aspects of it is that Zach and I have to figure out how we're going to finance.
No, I understand that.
it.
And obviously,
Without
if we
process.
and if we looked at it today and said, it looks like ballpark, it's $5 million, we probably don't need to write the letter.
Yeah, if I may, I want to just make one point, and maybe it was, buried in the presentation here. The advantage of this agreement is that it provides the ability to have you redirect a portion of the sand that the Corps would ordinarily take out of the channel as part of its dredging activities associated with the sand management plan, and have it placed at a more desirable location on your beaches. Whether there is a more desirable location or not is going to be fact dependent and is going to be a variable of your needs. The other advantage of pursuing this agreement is that because you're piggybacking on the Corps' dredging activities, you, in theory, are avoiding a mobilization and demobilization expense that would ordinarily arise if you were to do this work on your own, devoid of any relationship with the Corps. So again, you have to figure out whether you have a need, and you have to make sure that the economics of all of this make sense. But, in theory, one of the clear benefits here is that you can avoid a demobilization and a mobilization expense if you have a need.
Okay, thanks.
Great. I know we are at our time limit. Now we had two other slides, just as frying pan shoals and Wilmington Harbor is more just placeholders in here to answer any questions or discuss that if anybody had questions. So I'll open up now just to wrap this up with just any questions anybody has overall from anything we've talked about today.
Did you say you have two more slides? Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Not questions, but just to acknowledge these are obviously priorities for the village as we continue to pursue the prime hand shell permitting and possible support of Mike and his team in dealing with the federal agencies, national marine fisheries. So that's one element. And then the other priority on the Wilmington Harbor Navigation Channel Deepening Project. We know where that sits right now, sort of in a holding pattern. But we could foresee their assistance in supporting our position in protecting the interest of the island from potential erosion that we've seen from the last deepening project. So that, and the key elements there are ensuring, if the deepening comes to fruition, that I think the priority is that there's mitigation costs that are included in the overall project for the life of the project. That is positioning us better than the sand management plan, which we know is not ideal or
Subject to, or guaranteed.
guaranteed.
Yeah,
Right,
not
right.
guaranteed.
That this is something that would be good.
Is it, I don't know whether it's worth trying to understand whether there's been any kind of softening in the demand or the acceptance of the deepening project amongst various legislators and other government people that seem to be wholeheartedly in favor of it over the last few months, given all negative press and pushback on it. It might be worth finding that out, see if there are people that we could push on individually to kind of say, look, wait a minute, you need to hold off on this as an alternative to fighting it from an environmental standpoint.
Hello, my name is.
Yeah, that's a good point. I correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, Rand, the team. Up to this point, there's been no official position at the federal level with congressional members, one way or the other, on the deepening project. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, not in terms of a deep discussion on the agenda. So we appreciate those comments. What were you going to say, Ann?
No, I was answering Chris's question.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's answer Chris's question. And the answer should be yes or no.
I said he is correct. Yes. No, there's not been discussion.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Ann. Thank you.
Mayor, may I ask a part of the question? I'd be interested to hear from Earl or Brad. The Division of Coastal Management recently refused to issue a concurrence with the consistency of the Coastal Zone Management Act. So the project is at a standstill unless the Assistant Secretary of the Army overrules that. Have y'all ever seen the Assistant Secretary overrule a state's refusal to certify consistency?
I have not. I'm sure it's very rare. I don't know if Earl has seen it in his time.
Let me answer that question by saying I agree with Brad. It would be an extremely rare occurrence. If it has occurred, I believe there have been one or two incidences where the Corps, in connection with its own navigation needs, has made that determination. I can't swear to it. Here's the way I would answer the question. The Corps, if it's pursuing a project, has an obligation under the law to comply with the Coastal Zone Management Act to the maximum extent practicable. So the Corps works with the state and generally comes up with a plan in connection with a project it is pursuing that is compliant with, state determinations. But there is flexibility under the law in extenuating circumstances to do something different if that's appropriate. That is rarely done. If the project is being pursued, as a non-federal project, then, that non-federal interest has to comply absolutely with the coastal zone management, or with the requirements of the state law.
Thank you.
Are we going to talk about how they're helping us with pursuing funding for the wastewater treatment plant in this section?
Yeah, there was, I think, Anne
Yes.
has that.
Yes. This was when we submitted last year as an earmark, and an option to submit this one again this year, if we want to do that. I also included other funding avenues besides the appropriations part of this. If we submit this one again, that will be a decision we'll need to make pretty soon because the deadlines are coming up. The 18th is Congressman Rausser's deadline. They just released the forms and the deadline for that earlier this week. Or I guess Monday. Sorry, it's been a long few days.
So I guess I'm looking for more than, that's a status update of what we've done. I'm kind of looking for some kind of indication on likelihood that we're going to get any of these, or a sentiment on that.
I think to follow up later after we go through the wastewater treatment plant expansion project and the timeline of actual construction,
right?
How we've broken the scope of that down over the 36 months, 3-year project, and the various costs for the meat of the work to be done.
Right.
We're talking, about a $45 million project. And so it's with some of these things here that we're looking at are in the tune of $1 to $3 million. What the timing of when we would apply for those relative to when we start construction. I think that's another discussion to have.
Yeah, but we kind of already had that discussion in the sense that we already applied for some of these last year, right? So going back and unwinding that decision, we felt like we needed them last year. I guess what's not clear to me through any of these updates is what we think our likelihood of success of getting any of these funding. I'm certainly not in the favor of pull back from asking for it, but I want to make sure we're realistic and we have some understanding of, do we think any of these are going to come through or not?
We don't want to count the money into a plan for us going forward.
Yeah.
If the chances are 1 in 10.
Right.
But from where I'm seeing it, if we're going to ask for money, I want to ask for money that is going to be worthy of the ask, that's going to help fund as much of the project as possible.
Agreed.
Up to this point, we have funded the project through engineering, design, and permitting. It's just under $1 million.
Right.
Well, once we get the permits in hand, we're shovel ready.
Right.
And so again, when are we going to actually pull the trigger to start construction? May not occur till 2029. And we're here. So I think it's, again, in my mind, it's a discussion we need to have with the team and to figure out, okay, if we're going to ask for 1 to 3 million, what's that going to cover?
Right. But what did we think it was going to cover last year when we asked for it?
It's a good question. I can't.
So it sounds like we need to have, and I know we have a whole topic on this, but it sounds like to kind of answer your question, we need to have two paths. One is we get nothing.
Right.
And one is we get all of the things that we got. And there's a range in between. And we got to know what to do in each of those situations, but we got to have a plan for we get nothing.
Yeah.
That's certainly a possibility. It seems like
that's definitely a possibility, given that we've we've already asked and we didn't get any, right? So,
I understand. You're saying our request will probably be looked at more favorably if we can say specifically, we need 1 to 3 million to do this particular thing. As opposed to, we have this big project, $45 million, at least needs money.
Yeah.
I get that.
So we have a critical path for financing. This has to coincide with the design and actual planning and construction. And so as it goes, right now, get 3 million, let's get the 3 million out. We don't have it earmarked internally what we're going to use it for, but we're not going to stop asking for money.
I'm sure you may not ask for it.
Yeah, so I think in terms of, this isn't a question for them right now.
well, it is a question for them in the sense that, like, there are lobbyists, we're paying, them on our behalf, right, to push some of this. What I don't get a sense from them is, are we going to have a better chance of success if we continue to ask and to get declined, right? There's some logic to that, right? And we've been asking for this all along because we've already started down this path. We've already made the ask.
So JP reminded me, our intent with that initial ask was to take those funds to apply them to possibly equipment. If we phased it, if we looked at the chunks through, through the project, the 36 months, were there things that we could purchase up front,
Right.
Equipment. And so we evaluated that with the engineers who'll be here. And the outcome of that was that they didn't see that as a realistic or probabilistic opportunity. Is what they indicated.
Okay.
So I think at the time we were well intended in working with Ann and the team to try to get some funding, funds, but it just didn't come to fruition.
Yeah, so Ann, I think the underlining question here, and tell me if I'm wrong, is like asking for money on one level, it's let's keep on asking for money. But we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot asking for money that isn't going to make any impact or isn't related to anything we're doing. And so I guess we just need more of a strategy in terms of how we're looking for money. Does that?
And we've had in the discussions before, because it is such a large project, that it's going to take multiple avenues or multiple things to put together to find, or to get money, some here, some there. I'll say that one issue last year with appropriations, taking that route, is with that FY25 continuing resolution, where they did not have any earmarks in 25. What that created was a backlog of earmark requests. So you're essentially Congressman Rouser's office was taking requests of people with projects from FY25 and FY26 as well, and so it was more competitive on that front than it usually is. It's always a competitive process, but last year was even more exceptional, and most offices kind of just went with what they had already picked in 25. So this year's more of a fresh start, resetting earmarks back to zero, and less competitive.
Hey, Peter, perhaps this is for us to do in that next section where we have it. But I mean, it's pretty clear. What we just ought to have is, here's our plan. Here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3. I'm hearing a lot of talk and a lot of different things about a lot of subjects. But I'd like to know, what are we going to do today? What are we going to do tomorrow? What's our plan, and how are we going to move forward on this? I think that's what we need to have as a council in place. And perhaps that's what you have in that, section 7 on the agenda. I understand these guys are trying to answer a lot of, questions to which there are not answers as we talk to them here. But I think then what we need to do to be efficient with them is come forward and say, okay, here's what we'd like you to do now. Here's Ann or Mike or whoever it is that's going to answer, can we do this? They'll tell us yes or no, or here's your chances, yes or no. And then we'll decide on a plan of action. And I think that's going to be the best way to move forward here. But I mean, I'm hearing a lot of different information about a lot of different questions, a lot of things. I'd just like to know, all right, here's what we got. We got this project. It's going to be $45 million. Here's when we need to start asking for grants. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what our contingency plan is going to be. And we just need to have that laid out ourselves.
And I think, Jesse, you're right. All that makes perfect sense. And Scott, I think I agree with you that what we don't want to do is be talking about potential grants and stuff when, I mean, there's no work to do on these things right now unless we have planned to apply, financing options. Why? Who knows? I mean, we don't need to talk about it. We don't need to pay somebody to do any work on it right now
Agreed.
because we got no use.
It's not our priority right now. Let's focus on what is our priority.
Flip side of it is we can't be sitting here saying we got a $45 million project and it's going to be paid for with grants. Because at this point, nobody's given me any indication that there are any grants we're going to get that's going to pay for that $45 million.
And in fact, we have last year's history to suggest we didn't get any, right?
So we better be prepared to spend $45 million on
Exactly.
at some point. I don't know.
Right.
Hopefully never.
Okay.
Yeah, I think both of you, the last two folks that just spoke, are right on point. So thank you for what you suggested about you all deciding what you would like to see done, what steps, and what could be done incrementally, because we know that the appropriations would not be in one fell swoop would pay for this entire project. So it would have to be done incrementally, and then we'd have to be able to sell each increment. That's just the nature of the beast, since the congressmen only are allowed to approve so many appropriations projects per year, and naturally they approve different projects throughout their district. And what few projects the senators may approve, which Senator Budd does not do any of these specific requests, so that only leaves Senator Tillis, and of course he's going to be leaving office after this year. They vary, and they don't do anywhere near the number that they could do. Tillis's office has done some grants that have been helpful, but nowhere near the amount of possible grants or appropriations, I should say, that they could do. So I think you're both right in terms of looking at what's realistic, what your plan would be, what steps you would take, with the understanding that none of that can be guaranteed, but that it's something that we're happy to try to work with you and try to approach from a realistic standpoint, which is what you've also asked for. So if you all want to talk about that in your other session and have a frank discussion about what you feel like you can do, what you could do incrementally, and how that may help you achieve your goal, then you can certainly share that with us, and we're happy to have a frank discussion with you about that, as we've been trying to do also with the congressman's office about what would be realistic. But we would need to know what that incremental plan would be, and whether or not there's going to realistically be the money available.
Mayor, can I just add one thing to what Mike just and Ann both said? Is that again, as you think about this project, again, it's a large scale project, but funds are available for planning as well as for construction, and so the way you definitely can't you're not going to get funding for this, as you said, 100% through grants by any means, but looking to secure some grant funding that'll help hold down costs and that kind of thing associated with this. But that can include, again, support through the earmark process for the planning phase. Beyond that, starting now on it, you can also know that there are opportunities in the longer term for federally backed financing as well. And so that can help reduce local costs or costs associated with executing on the project outside of grants.
I think we got all that. The point that I'm making here is that Ann put up that chart. That's the chart. We're going to work from that. If you have other stuff, Ann, that chart's not complete, then tell us that. But now it's on us to come to you with a plan as to here's how we're going to proceed, and we'll do that.
Okay.
Great. Oh, that's everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Mike and group, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you all. Good to be with you, and we look forward to working with you, and also look forward to the group that'll be coming up to Washington this month. So thanks to you all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.